Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Pennyworth as well as the latest episode of Preacher. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Pennyworth, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Preacher. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Pennyworth. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We do have Alfred going out for his revenge. Like, obviously he's trying to track down Curzon. It even turns out the douchebag actually has Esme's ring, and he's wearing it on his military uniform like a badge of honor. So kind of shows you how crazy he is. And even Baza being like, yo, we need to be careful. Like, there's no reasoning with a madman, because even Dave Boy's like, all you did was make a joke years ago, and all these years later he kills your fiance to get back at you for it. That's why I feel like there's a lot more to this. I don't think it's as simple as, oh, you cracked a joke and that's what this is. I think that's what it's meant to seem like, but I think there's a larger game at play here. I just don't know what. Like, someone's trying to get back at Alfred, but maybe it's not necessarily him, maybe it's someone else, and Curzon is just a pawn in all this. That was my thought before, and it still kind of resonates now, because it just seems interesting. Like, but I mean, not unless it's maybe it's just like, hey, he's legitimately crazy, and then Alfred besmirching his name, making his own men in his unit laugh at him, just made him snap, if crazy and evil people can, hurt other people for, even smaller things, So maybe it's something as simple as that, but I feel like there might be a grander plot with this. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, though. But Alfred ended up visiting, like, the battalion that he was a part of and is asking for their help, but they're reluctant to help him at first because there is that camaraderie. It's like, we're brothers in arms. You're asking us to betray one of our brothers. But at the same time, it's like, if he did such an atrocious thing, we don't need someone like that to be a part of our battalion. Like, because even the guy, was it like Malcolm? That guy was like crazy and murderers. Like, that's not just Curzon. That's kind of all of us when it comes to the whole military situation. But someone like him going to the lengths that he did, it's like, yeah. So he's willing to help out. And there's also that little backstory of, like, the whole Sandra situation, and obviously she's pissed at Alfred because Alfred was dealing with some stuff, and obviously she thought there was something there, because obviously she has a thing for Alfred, but it's kind of like a hit and quit it situation. So obviously for her, it's like she's trying to avoid him right now. Obviously the dad doesn't know, but I get the feeling like Sandra's dad knows on some level. Alfred's like, yeah, just let her know I'm sorry. He's like, for what? Whatever it is. Alfred knows exactly what it is. I'm sure Baza and Dave Boy know exactly what's up, but so it's gonna be interesting to see if that ends up becoming anything else. But I'm skipping right to it, but I love the fact that Alfred shows up there looking for Curzon, and lo and behold, who the hell does he run into? Freaking Sykes. I love that Bet's there, and she's like, aren't you supposed to be there? She's like, well, I'm not. And they go chasing after him. I even love her being like, get the bastard. It's like Esme was her friend. Wasn't just a friend. She was also secretly in love with Esme. So sadly, Curzon ended up getting away. It's actually interesting because it seems like they kind of focus on the fact is that, like, Alfred's in good shape. It's almost like everything that he did with John Ripper kind of helped him. Like, I mean, I guess that was kind of the whole point, maybe, to kind of get him in shape. I guess it was also to do what he needed to do with the whole killing Undine's husband and everything, so maybe it had something to do with that. But it just, like, to me, I thought that's what they were going to focus on, because you see him kind of going after Curzon, and he's kind of keeping pace to a certain extent. It's kind of like, yeah, it's because all that running you did with John Ripper put you back in, shape after you kind of let everything kind of fall apart after, Esme died. So quite the unusual alliance, especially because Alfred thought she was dead. But I'm so interested because we're probably going to see them buddy up a lot more, which is going to be very interesting. I mean, to be fair, like, everyone, well, high-ranking people think she's dead when she's not, so she's going to have to avoid the spotlight. But I doubt too, well, because Alfred's going to have to avoid being around his parents because they know what Sykes looks like, so probably bring her around Dave Boy and Baza because they wouldn't know. But I'm so curious to see what that ends up turning into, the interesting conversations they're going to have. I can't wait to be as a viewer, a fly on the wall during that conversation, because they're going to have a lot to talk about. And since we're on the subjects of Sykes, let's kind of talk about Peg and Harwood, who they both went to see Frances. It's so interesting. Frances talking to her. It's so interesting because, like, I guess, you know, she was always part of, because I was curious about her rise to the ranks. Like, was she second in command to the Raven Society? How far do her and Harwood go back? Regardless of all that, it's interesting, like, him kind of breaking down his plans and everything to her, but you can tell she's kind of like, yeah, sure. Like, he doesn't tell her everything, but obviously he doesn't believe this peace will last, because for him it's like, well, you did kill Undine's husband in front of her, which Frances even admits. She's like, yeah, I didn't actually kill him. Everyone thinks I did, but I actually didn't do it. He's like, oh, that's an interesting turn of events. We, as the audience, know that it, and Alfred also knows that Undine's husband's murder was, well, it wasn't on Frances. He knows that at least John Ripper was behind it. He doesn't know that Undine herself was behind it. So that's an interesting turn of events. But obviously Harwood is going to make it, you know, a big spectacle when he returns to the public eye. He's got to figure things, like, he doesn't have everything 100% planned out. He's not 100% back to being the man that he was before, but obviously he's got revenge in his heart, but at the same time, you know, doing what he thinks is best for their country and everything. So, which is also interesting because tying it all together, there was that thing that Bet was reading, was almost like it's like a horoscope, I guess, basically saying like, oh yeah, like certain people will kind of betray you or something. It's like, oh, you know who that sounds like? And then Harwood is like, that's not going to be Frances Gaunt. She's not like that. That's just not who she is. But I do wonder, or not unless it's supposed to represent it's going to be someone else that ends up betraying him. I don't know what that's going to be. That's going to be interesting. I just like the crazy dynamic that's between them, like him being like, well, you have to stay here, Bet. And he's like, wish us luck. She's like, luck. And he kisses her on the forehead. He's up there painting Peg's toenails later on, and even Bet being like, oh, won't you do mine? It's a weird dynamic that I love. I'm so interested to see where that kind of goes. But along with all of that, like, we end up finding out that apparently Alfred's dad is a part of the Raven Society, which is interesting. I'm curious, because it's interesting because your son has ties to both. He has ties to the Raven Society and the No Name League, which is kind of interesting. But I'm curious to see, because obviously, like I said, Frances, she's probably going to bite her time. She's kind of like, well, Harwood was a leader and everything, so I kind of have to listen to what he says for now. But I think she has her own plans, and I think she probably thinks his ideas are a little crazy, or at the very least not as well thought out. So she's reluctant to kind of voice her opinion too much, because Harwood is Harwood. So who am I to really kind of question, like, the previous leader of the, you know, Raven Society? So we'll see where that ends up going and everything. So. But along with all of that, we have the other side of this story that deals with Martha and Thomas. Like, obviously, they're going to try and get Patricia. Obviously, Martha doesn't realize that it's been 3 days, because she's like, wait, what? She thought she lost a little time because it's not the first time probably in this situation. But to this extreme, she's like, wait, what? Waking up naked in a field. She's obviously pissed at Thomas because it's like, all you care about is your family name, because Patricia's out there somewhere most likely smearing the family name, as she kind of has done before. And so they go to see Alistair, because obviously Martha's thinking like, oh, he's a Satanist, that she saw the devil, you know. So the question then becomes like, well, was that real? Was that just her own drugs? Was it a combination of the two? Whatever the case may be. And it's so interesting because it seems like Alistair has his own game he's playing. Like, it's more so, it doesn't seem like he's more so in the sense that it seems like he sows the seed of darkness in people. He sees darkness in people, and it seems like he kind of pulls at those strings. Like, he keeps someone like Jason around, and we know Jason Ripper has, you know, a dark side. And we can tell that Patricia has a dark side because she's empty and looking for something she's unhappy with her life. That's why she kind of ends up in the situation she does, like on these benders and stuff like that, because she's trying to fill some hole, some loneliness in her heart. And I guess, you know, Alistair's ceding to that, but it seems like she's happy now. And obviously, you know, the whole thing of her kind of going off on Thomas, calling him cold-hearted, selfish, because for her, it's like, you don't even care about me. All you care about is the family name. And he's like, right. So, you know, because it's like, all you care about is like, the fact is that our family won't be worth this much. Also, I do like the fact is, it's like, oh, referencing the billionaire thing, because I've talked about that before in certain regards. Like, it's interesting because I think over the years the Wayne family's wealth has changed. I guess, depending on times, they kind of inflated. Because initially, it was millionaires, but now I think more continuity tends to lean them towards the billionaire, just to show like how stupidly rich the Wayne family is, so. But it's interesting, like, why is, why Thomas is the way that he is. The fact is that he is a bit cold-hearted, that the family name does mean so much to him. Maybe it was something that's kind of drilled into them by their parents, that the fact is, if you don't meet a certain standard, like, everywhere you go, because even, Alistair kind of takes a jab at him, being like, oh, like, the fact of the matter is, like, you never know whether people want you for you, or is it because of your last name that they want something from you, it's like, how can you ever tell where people's loyalties lie in that situation? I even love Martha being like, oh, like, you don't know who you're messing with. The Wayne families have brought nations to their knees. Like, they'll come after you hard, but obviously Thomas leaves without much of a fight, because this is where Patricia wants to be, and it's that whole complicated thing where it's like, no matter what he says, he does love his sister and he cares about her deeply, but I think he's kind of caught between who he is and who he's supposed to be, and I think that's made him into who he is. And I think this is all going to be kind of like channeled into who Thomas, like I said, depending on the continuity. I don't know if it's a general continuity thing that they do a lot in the comic books or not, but obviously, like, like certain things like Gotham or the Telltale Batman game made it seem like the Waynes did some shady shit. In particular, Thomas was into some shady dealings, and I mean, and I think it's just, maybe it's, part of the whole Wayne family legacy, sadly, kind of shaking hands with, like, Don Falcone type of situation, stuff like that, So I'm curious where things kind of are taking Thomas in this particular regard. I did like the fact that Alistair kept tugging at the fact is that, there's a devil, there's a beast in you, and he's like, no, there isn't. Even throwing out the fact is, oh, you work with the No Name League, and it's like, oh shit, how do you know about that? Also, he also knows that he's CIA, which Patricia's finding out for the first time. It's like, oh, have you killed anyone? And even Martha's like, it makes so much sense. Which I was under the impression she was CIA too, so maybe she was, and it's just the whole thing of like, oh, you were CIA, but you didn't tell me. Or maybe it is, because, Alfred was under the impression that she was with the No Name League and that she's a CIA agent, or both. Turns out that's only Thomas, potentially. We'll see. Because Martha was basically saying she worked for someone, and that someone sometimes called for her to work with the other organizations, in this particular case the No Name League. So we still don't 100% know, like, we know kind of why Thomas is there, because he's literally being ordered to be there. That's kind of part of his job. Martha, we still not 100% sure, but maybe that's something we'll kind of dive into. It is interesting though. It seems like, because obviously, like, the story. I like that the story isn't just jumping down to this whole like, oh, Thomas and Martha are like, oh, a match made in heaven, and it's like, oh, we know where they end up, but it's still going to be a bumpy road along the way. I like that it's not just going to be like an immediate thing, like, oh, they found each other, they fell in love. It's like, no, they were brought together under some very complicated circumstances, and some very complicated stuff keeps them bound together. Obviously, Martha's still dreaming about seeing the devil, and just for her, she doesn't know what happened to her, but she knows that there was evil afoot, and stuff kind of hints to like maybe there was other stuff that did happen, because even Jason was like, oh, the fun we had and stuff like that. It's just that obviously Martha doesn't remember, so that's not a good sign. And so along with all of that, there's the whole situation of like Martha wanting to go back, because it's like, we need to take down that man, and reluctantly you have Thomas going along as well, because for him it's like, you're just crazy, all the stuff that you're saying, there's no such thing as the devil. And I think, maybe, because Thomas is a very well-educated man, that's the whole point Alistair was making, that he is a very like science person. It's kind of, he stays in the real world, but the thing is like, and I think this is something that Alistair was kind of leaning towards, the evil in man. If that's not the devil, then what is, and then they show him a tape of what ends up happening to Patricia, and it's just kind of like seeing his sister like that, like it's enough to drive him mad, and it brought out kind of the devil in him, and he starts beating the shit out of Jason, strangling him, wrapping tape around him, shoving it in his mouth. And then Alistair's like, oh, now how can you say that you didn't see the devil when such a beast existed? And obviously it freaks Thomas out, because it's not necessarily that he saw the devil, but he saw who he is, he saw what he's capable of. You can make the argument that's sadly kind of the devil getting passed down into Bruce eventually, because we know that Bruce being able to do what he does as Batman, I mean, to be fair, maybe it wasn't just his parents' murder, maybe that was enough to break what was already there. I think that could be kind of how you see that. There was already a little something in the Wayne blood, in particular in Thomas, way before Bruce was born, even before their murder, there was something already in Bruce's DNA that has that devil, and it got broken loose the moment he lost his parents. Maybe that might be kind of what they're kind of hinting to and setting up in that regard. But Patricia gets let go. She even follows like Alistair's command, who was like, "Oh, go with your brother." It is interesting. It does make you wonder that what is like I said, it seems like he's playing with people. Like, it's almost like people are his playthings. I'm curious, is he going to come back into the story or not? Like, he might have played the role that he was meant to play that showed Thomas, like, there's something inside of you. You want to try to act like you're this well-educated man, but at the end of the day, you're like any man. There's evil in you, just bottled beneath the surface that, that you can end up tapping into at any time. That, maybe at one point, his reluctancy to kill people, didn't want to do that with Francis. Maybe he thought, hey, I'm a good man. But after this experience, maybe he's going to question that. Like, maybe I'm not a good person like I thought I was, I'm sure he's done things that he isn't proud of, especially with this whole CIA situation. That in itself is a whole, can of worms. But everything with the No Name League and everything, it's just so interesting because, like, Martha's like, you saw him, didn't you? And he says, no. But, I think that could be up for interpretation because he didn't literally see the devil, but he saw it within himself. He saw the beast that he is, because I think what Alistair says, like, maybe there was some truth to it. I don't know. The whole, like, oh, I didn't do anything to you, mother. It's like something happened. She was tripping, like, to the point, like, the structure of the house changed. It seemed like she was getting lost. So, like, there's definitely something there. And I'm curious, are they ever going to tackle that? Is that just going to be like a sinister element that push their story along, or is that a sinister element that will come back in the story? I'm curious to see, because I don't think Martha's going to let this go, even though Thomas is kind of saying, let it go. But I think Martha isn't, I don't know. And maybe even Patricia might even try and sneak back. I mean, the way she is now, will that stay the same way forever? Will she come to resent Thomas for it? Because it's like, oh, you took me away from there. I was happy. My happiness wasn't good enough for you. Because even Thomas was like, I'd be happy for you if I believed you. Which she was like, believe me. But he thought there was something else to this happiness, which it seems like there is, because that whole thing, it's like, well, what Thomas saw, was that more of a thing of consensual thing? Maybe it was. Maybe it was her kind of in a state, not being in a proper state of mind at the time, kind of like Martha's situation. I don't know. I'm interested to dive into that all to kind of figure out like what the hell that all ends up being. Like I said, whether or not it ends up being more or not. So I'm very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward to the next episode. What's going to happen, with Alfred's dad being a part of the Raven Society, kind of going along with what they believe, what their plans are for the country and everything, where that will leave Alfred at the end of the day. Once again, where him and Bet are going to be at the end of the day. I'm curious to see where it all takes us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Preacher, a great episode. There's so much that went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's focus on Tulip and Cassidy. Obviously, they bury Jesse, and it's obviously a heavy burden on, like, I think, because obviously for Cassidy, he blames himself the most. It's like, even though Jesse used Genesis on him, he still, it still hits him. He's even looking at his hand, just a reminder of, his arm burning from the whole situation. It's still so fresh in their minds. Tulip is literally destroying a church, trying to get God's attention, just especially after she read Jesse's letter, which we don't even know what it says, but it was enough to bring tears to her eyes, so it probably just pissed her off even more after everything. So now they come up with a plan on, like, we know how to get God's attention. I was like, okay, at first I was like, oh, you're going to go after Jesus because, where he is. But then again, in the grand scheme of things, we know God doesn't have that big of, anytime he asks about his child, he's never referring to Jesus, he's referring to Humperdinck. And it turns out they go to Danny, because it turns out apparently Jesse had set it up so that Danny hid Humperdinck, which is interesting. Which I also love that we're bringing Danny back. It's like we haven't seen her since season 1, and we're bringing that back. I also love it's like, what I want you to do. And Cassie's like, if you don't want to do it, I can do it. But Tulip does it. She puts a bullet in his head. It's like, and Danny's like, you killed my husband. Yeah. And Tulip's like, you've literally been asking me to do it for the past 10 years. She's like, yeah, I know. I just didn't think you'd actually do it. That's the crazy thing. It's like, I guess because it was just, it's like kind of like our cat and mouse thing of like, she hates her husband, she wants him dead, but at the same time, I think there's some part of her that's like, I never thought you would actually pull the trigger. You've literally said no any other time, so it's like, why would this time be any different? To be fair, Tulip is super pissed. She's got revenge in her heart, so it's like, and as Cassie says it, the gloves are off now, so apparently they hid Humperdoo in, what would you call, would that be considered a mosque? Like, the fact is, I mean, I guess it's kind of like the perfect place to hide Humperdoo would be in a Jewish community. So that was really interesting. And, it's like, are you ready? Are you guys ready for this? Danny was kind of building the anticipation. And you have Cassie been like, yeah, give us a minute because, we need to catch our breath. Tulip was like, just open the damn door. And then, like, Danny plays. I wonder, how does Danny know? Did Jesse tell her, or did she just stumble across that he reacts that way to that song? Either way, I'm curious, I guess this was Jesse's way to make, because I was about to say, like, because he couldn't bring himself to kill Humperdoo, because no matter what the circumstances is, Humperdoo's an innocent person. He's not, like, some terrible person like the Grail. The Grail just wants to use him for terrible reasons, so I was curious, like, but why? I guess he didn't want to take the chance, because obviously we know the Grail is looking for him, so it's like the Grail wouldn't look there for him, also because, they're looking for all the clones, even killing all the clones that they don't find. So I'm wondering, it was just probably meant to be keeping him in hiding so that the Grail can't actually find him. So that was interesting. It's also interesting too how that ties into like Hitler and Jesus's situation. I love Jesus hugging Humperdoo. He's like, my child. And it's like, whoa. And it's like, Hitler's like, yeah, look, yeah, that erection. But other than that, what do you think of him? And plays his song, and it's like, he doesn't dance, and Jesus is like, isn't he supposed to be a good dancer? And it's like, yeah, because I figured as much. Hitler's known for a while, but I was like, he's not done anything with it. And the fact is, I knew he was lying to Hairstar, because he was like, oh yeah, he's magnificent. And I'm like, I know it's BS. You know it's BS. So what would you do? It's like, because he's like, oh, that your actual child, they left you. So they have no idea where the Messiah is. And Jesus is like, but you do, don't you? It's like, I wonder, does Hitler actually know, and he's just not saying anything? He says he doesn't know, but come on, it's Hitler. He's not the most honest of people. It's like, Jesus. The fact is, once again, the show having these conversations, like, it's a crazy situation. Regardless, he starts going like, oh, but there is a Messiah in front of us. And Jesus is like, who? He's like, you. Now, obviously, Jesus is reluctant about it, because we know no matter how much he disagrees with his dad, all he ever wants to do is impress his dad. Doing this would be going against his dad's wishes, so he's reluctant to do it. But it's interesting. I'm wondering why Hitler is doing that, because I guess for him, it's like, to be fair, heaven wants an idiot kind of running things. It's kind of like everyone's mentality about things. So it's kind of like, why not put you in a seat? But then at the same time, I think it's also because Hitler definitely has his own plans. He probably wants to put Jesus in that position because he knows like Jesus will be easier to handle, maybe because he knows it'll go against God's plans, and maybe that'll make, I don't know, maybe he feels like Jesus isn't that good of a negotiator, so it's kind of like, oh, I'll be able to kind of get the leg up on him anyway. So I'm curious, like, what he's got planned. So, like I said, that's kind of all that. I also love the fact is that Tulip, once again, the gloves are off, so Tulip kicked Danny's ass multiple times. They got Humperdoo. And then I love the whole thing of like they're leaving, and it's like they're trying to take our Messiah. I love that dude was like, hey, I didn't know we had a Messiah. What was his name? Because we didn't tell you. What was it? We didn't tell you. What was it she called him? I forgot. But I love that he was literally one person who didn't know. But that's so interesting because Danny was like, oh, but his power and whatnot. I guess that's the whole point. Even though Humperdoo is set up that, oh, like he just has this energy about him that literally everyone there was willing to, it's not a mosque, is it? Not I'm sitting here, it's a synagogue, right? I just thought about that. I'm not well versed in religious stuff, so I'm sitting here thinking it's a synagogue, not a mosque. I just thought of maybe once again I don't know. That just I literally threw myself off because I just did that and I corrected myself in my head like that. Regardless, nevertheless. But the thing is, I think that's kind of a point of kind of give you a preview of what Humperdoo's supposed to represent. That like no matter what, like all these people will fall in love with him and become his followers, which we still don't 100% know what Humperdoo's role is in everything, but still. But I love them taking Humperdoo. And even Cassidy explaining things. It's like, oh yeah, like he knew a woman named Betsy. She had like 6 kids. You know, the war came, and one by one, her kids died. Even her final child died at his father's wake. And it's like, you know, despite all that, you know what, Betsy still loves God. And why? Because she's an idiot like all of you. The fact of the matter is saying that God does these terrible things, and the fact of the matter is you're just okay with it. And you just keep loving him, thinking that it's all part of his plan. And you know what we plan to do? We're going to take Humperdoo, who is God's favorite, and we're going to kill him right in front of God. It's like, whoa. And, you know, it's like, look at that. This is their revenge plan. Granted, it seems like Tulip when you look at her eyes, it seems like she might have some hesitation because, you know, the same reason why Jesse couldn't bring himself to kill Humperdoo, even though it would stop the Grail, I think is somewhat there for Tulip as well. Like, I think she's going to have reservations when it comes to this. We'll see whether or not that'll stick. I'm curious to see, like, with everything that's going on with Hitler saying, like, oh, Jesus, you should be the Messiah. And now that Humperdoo is back in play, like, what's that all going to turn out to be? So there is all of that. Then there's I'm going to skip right to it. The whole reveal. Freaking Hoover 2 is an undercover cop. I lost my mind. I was like, no way. That's crazy. He was there. It's like, oh yeah. He's like, I'm not doing this to be a detective. I didn't do this for the honoring. I'm doing this because I'm trying to, you know, do the right. It's like, I did not see that coming. Holy shit, he's an undercover cop. Doesn't matter because obviously Featherstone took care of that. I'm so curious to see what's going to happen there because obviously she's going to use this as an opportunity to get back into Hairstar's good graces and be like, I found a mole. He was an undercover cop. I killed him. Or, you know, I'm almost halfway surprised, well, I guess because she loves hair so much, but I'm wondering, is that going to change? Because part of me was wondering, it's like, you don't think she's going to try and take the throne from him and try to become the next Allfather or something like that? I don't know. I mean, she's sitting at the bigwig's chair right now, and now that hair is not there, I'm curious if she's going to try and run things. I mean, the only people that knows that she's supposed to be dead is Hoover 2, who is now dead, and Hairstar, who's still in Australia, apparently trying to get his penis back from a dingo. So last time we saw, he was unsuccessful, and it looked like the dingo got away with his penis. That getting beautiful thing seems like that's not going to go. Doesn't look like he's going in the right direction currently, you know, with all of that. So we'll see what ends up happening in that regard. But I'm very interested to see what Featherstone does. Is she just still going to be like, okay, yes, now that Hoover's dead, now you'll have to kill me yourself, sir? Or, like I said, is she going to use it as a bargaining chip? I don't know. Then we get to the also heavy-hitting aspect to the episode. Jesse's somewhere, and he runs into Fior. I'm like, and it's like, oh, this is supposed to be heaven. I'm like, wait. 2 things. 1, if Fior's here, where's DeBlanc? That kept crossing my mind. I was like, something's not right here. because I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. For one, because Hitler even made the point of being like, oh, you actually think you're going to heaven? And I was like, I'm actually surprised that you went to heaven instead of hell. I thought, oh, maybe because you did that selfless thing at the end, like telling Cassidy to let you go. I thought that might have been like what kind of pushed him over the edge. I was like, maybe that's it. But then I'm like, I don't know. And it turns out Fior's talking about everything, about how the war went, that basically we won a battle, they won a battle. It was kind of a back and forth. There was kind of no losers in this whole thing until God left. So, in the grand scheme of things, you know, it's like, yeah, Jesus is, you know, good, but he's no Hitler. Once again, the statements this show says and will have you repeating. I love that, like, even Jesse repeated back to Fior. He's like, yeah, Jesus is no Hitler. Yeah, that's good to know. Just because it's like, basically, Hitler's a very good negotiator. That actually, he does a very good job running hell, which I guess, once again, kind of makes me think that's kind of the point of why Hitler's doing everything he has, setting Jesus up the way he is to be the next Messiah, because he knows he can get one over on Jesus and manipulate him and turn the tides on him. And once again, maybe that's the whole point. Like I said, we don't know 100% of what his plan is, but Fiora is like, okay, what we want is for you to take over God's place. I'm like, dude, first you have Hera wanting you to be the new Messiah. Now Fiora is like, yeah, we want you to be the next God. And I like that whole thing of Jesse touching the chair. He kind of gets a vision and his eyes are glowing and stuff like that. You can hear him using Genesis and stuff. It's actually pretty dope. But he goes, no, because it's kind of what Cassie was saying. No matter what the circumstances is, for Jesse, he still looks at it as a sin to turn against God like that. Because for him, it's like, you know, he's still... I think it's still all that stuff from his dad about being a good person, you know, because that's all what Jesse strived to. He's done bad stuff in his life, but he's always tried to do good to kind of balance it out. So now there's the whole conversation with Fiora about like the fact that he doesn't even understand why he's here, why you'd even offer him this position, because it's like, I'm not even that good of a person. He's like, I've killed people. Yeah, some have deserved it, but not everyone. You know, there's innocent people that have kind of died too. Like he talked about a bank teller in Texas who died just because he got in my way, you know? So it's like, I'm not a good person. And I even love Fiora talking about the fact that he smokes now just so that he doesn't end up doing like an 8-ball or something like that because of his time with Cassidy back. Like, I love that they're bringing all that back. That's, once again, that's a literally one episode from season 2 they're kind of referencing. So it's just kind of interesting. And then Jesse starts kind of piecing things together to be like, wait, something's not right here. Lo and behold, he isn't in heaven. He is in fact in hell. I'm like, oh, holy crap. And so it's like, yes, this isn't real. It's a projection, but, which I am curious, like, would the word work on a demon? Because do demons even have souls? It's kind of like the question. You know, like, the word works on angels, but they have souls, I would assume. So I'm curious the same thing for demons or not. Regardless. So there's that whole situation. But it's like, even though this is all fake, the offer is real. Now, I thought was really interesting is what they did. It's basically showing, because obviously God's listening to the tapes and stuff like that, which that's another thing to bring it back, because Hare brought Jesse all of his prayers in season 2, and they were all on cassette tapes, and now we know like he legitimately got that from. Obviously, it's something I didn't think about at the time, but now in retrospect, it's like, right, that makes sense, because apparently God's very retro because he watches things on VHS and cassette tapes and stuff like that. But he's listening to people's prayers. It's like, no. And then Fiora brought him the news about Genesis being lost, which is interesting because season 1 makes you think that the only people who knew about that was DeBlanc and Fiora, which I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So now it turns into a situation of like, so God knew, and that's actually why God left, because he knew that Genesis was free, and so I guess that set everything in motion, and it's kind of what I thought it was. It is that thing of like, it's a repeat of the dinosaur situation. He's literally causing the apocalypse because he wants to start over his creation 3.0, that basically he's replacing humans. That's what this whole apocalypse thing is. He's starting from scratch again like he did the dinosaurs. I figured as much, but we see that he's actually working on his next species, his next creation, which is interesting. But I'm wondering why Genesis leaving. Maybe Genesis was the literal genesis to this all. That the fact is that Genesis being gone, being like, oh, he knew that some shit was going to go down on Earth because Genesis would find a potential host, and that start everything. But why specifically is that the thing that made him go, now's the time? Maybe because maybe, like I said, maybe it's supposed to be a sign. Maybe it's just because of what Genesis is, being half angel, half human. I mean, not half human, half demon. Maybe that's what sparked it, because it's a being all on its own. There's no other creature like Genesis out there. Maybe that's what sparked it in his head of the, hey, I even love like Jesse calling out about, yeah, that dog suit is a weird thing. Even Fiora being like, no, it's a fucking, basically an atrocity. Just like, it's a super weird situation. Don't kind of undercut it. So, who's setting that up? Is that hell? Is that Hitler thing trying to do that? Because that's a competing thing, because like, oh, potentially he's setting up he's setting up Jesus to be the Messiah, but then like now putting Jesse in the position to be God. Like, what's up with that? Because I even thought it was kind of interesting, because even Jesse was like, he did what he did. He has a complicated relationship with his friends, but it's like he did what he did because he had to get away from them, because he was afraid he was going to get them killed just because of, you know, everything. So it's interesting. So many roads are colliding at once, dude. We are 3 episodes away before the end? Because, like I said, I'm under the impression this season's only going to be 10 episodes. I think season 2 was the only one that was like 13. So I'm pretty sure this is only. I think I remember looking that was only going to be 10. So we are 3 episodes away from seeing how this whole shebang is going to end. Like, dude, this is taking some very, very interesting turns, and I'm curious because also, like, even though he's dead now, I think his real name is Nix, but Hoover too, it's like he reported to his boss, and it's like, yo, if what you're saying is true, we got to act upon this. It's a global conspiracy and all that. So it's like, is anything going to happen on that front? To be fair, the Grill has powerful people everywhere, so anything goes down, they can shut it down. So we shall see what Jesse ultimately does. What Tulip, Cassidy, and Humper do, what that becomes. I'm so excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. Because it does also bring up, really quickly, a question of like, well, what does happen to an angel when they die? That's why I was like, yeah, if Fior's here, what about the Blanc? It's like, you go back to heaven? I was like, I figured it wouldn't work out like that. But nevertheless, it's definitely going to be interesting. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about today. Next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.